Hello everyone, welcome to today's BioAroundWorld event, April 19th and April 20th, co-organized by BioAroundWorld and MSQ Ventures. My name is Ziyan, project manager at MSQ. It is my great pleasure as today's host for the event. Thank you everyone for attending our event. This event will include two parts. Part 1 in today and Part 2 in tomorrow. Part 1 will include opening speech from BioAroundWorld founders and 2 roundtable discussions. I hope everyone here can enjoy the following 2 hours. Let's begin with an opening speech from 7 founders of BioAroundWorld. Echo Hindle-Yang, MSQ Ventures founder and CEO. Shen, NeuShen Therapeutics CEO and founder. Peter Greaney, ADC Therapeutics Head of Corporate Development. Zhang, Overland Pharmaceutical co-founder and CEO. Alvin, Neurophth Therapeutics CEO. Chen, Jonas Day Partners, and Ginger Ding, MSQ Ventures Managing Director. They will share their visions and missions of the BioAroundWorld. Let's welcome.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. BioAroundWorld is officially launched. And so who we are a group of pianists and experts of global drug development who believe in borderless drug development and are determined to solve any issue related to cross-border collaboration. The vision of BioAroundWorld is to accelerate global drug development with no patients left behind. The mission is to streamline global collaboration on drug development by sharing real-life experience to achieve greater harmonization. The goal of the BioAroundWorld is to build the knowledge sharing platform focused on global collaboration in biopharma and the biotech sector. The story behind building BioAroundWorld is actually the last day of 2021. Joan and I worked in Prospect Park in Brooklyn. She shared with me her personal journey of developing drugs globally since 2005. I was amazed by her determination to solve the challenges that she had. So that means she had to go beyond her roles to build the infrastructure for the global collaboration. Biotech companies are facing similar challenges, but without so much insight and knowledge of another region, which sometimes delay the drug development globally. I proposed to Zhang that we should build a knowledge sharing platform, that her knowledge will be shared with more people. She said, I would love to do that. So that's why she is with me today. And she is a very generous person and has been helping so many people already in the industry. So she thinks such a platform can make a big impact. That's how BioAroundWorld idea was born. Since that day, more experts who share similar vision and mission and determination to solve the challenges of global collaboration joined our founding member team. Alvin, CEO of Neurophth, Zhang, the CEO of Overland, Peter Greaney, head of BD at ADCT, Chen, partner at John Day, Ginger Ding, managing director at MSQ Ventures. We are looking forward for working with you, and also we're looking for more experts to join us to make global drug development easier and faster. Thank you for the great support, and also especially thanks to my dear friend Johnson to join me today.
Well, thank you, Echo. Thank you for making me part of it. And that's, we had, shared in our visions that, this will be, the great platform to provide, the opportunities for the well-known scientists, clinicians, or business people to coming together to share our real-life experiences, tips and challenges, and finding solutions to accelerate the global development. I think that's the whole intention. And as you all, mentioned that, with my personal journeys being in US and China, we've seen the needs. Patients are the same or similar, and our goals are similar and the same. So why don't we just hold our hands together to building our collaborations for the same goal, which is bringing the innovative drugs to our patients more efficiently. However, because of our personal experiences, we've seen the differences in terms of this policies and the regulatory environment and the commercialization strategy differences, as well as some patient and ethnic differences. So, however, we know there is a way to work out the differences. So then with our experts and panels, and Echo, you have done a tremendous, wonderful job to bring them together. We've seen that benefit, to share the life experiences and share different companies from different perspectives. So I fully believe these collaborations and partnerships will really synergize together to accelerate our drug development in the world. So again, thank you, Echo, for bringing this together, and then I will be part of it. As long as we all coming together, and then I'm hoping the BioAroundWorld will continue to grow to bring more inspirations and more stories. So we all together work together to build the innovative drug development platforms and bring the drugs to the world, and no patients to be left out. Thank you.
I'm Greaney, Head of Corporate Development at ADC Therapeutics. And I just wanted to share with you some of my thoughts. I'm really driven by the thought of getting therapies to patients across the world as quickly as possible. And I have to ask myself, why should a patient in one country be unable to get a therapy that a patient is receiving somewhere else? And I think when we think about this, there's a lot of improvement that's possible in this space when we think about true global drug development. And so what we're doing here at BioAroundWorld is building that platform around knowledge sharing, people who have really experienced developing drugs across various different geographies. And I was personally amazed after having the real privilege of setting up a collaboration in China, which we'll talk about more in this event. I was really amazed by the number of people who were interested to learn more about what we'd learned from that experience. And I think it's the case that not everybody understands how to really do that. So a great opportunity here to really collate the thinking across different geographies, thinking about the market need, thinking about drug development approaches, such as clinical trial design, regulations, etc. So I think this is a great opportunity to bring it all together, and I'm very excited to be part of this BioAroundWorld event, and look forward to interacting with each and every one of you. Thank you.
Thanks, Echo. Thanks, Peter, for excellent speech already. And so my name is Zhang. I'm a co-founder and the CEO of Overland Pharmaceuticals. I co-founded the company 2 years ago and shared exactly the same vision as BioAroundWorld, and with the goal to accelerate the development and bridging innovation between the US and Asia and Chinese in the ecosystem. And I'm very proud to be part of this event and share some of our personal experience with the audience here, and how we thinking about the accelerating the innovation and bridging the breakthrough therapeutics between different different ecosystem. And I will share host with Peter for a case study between Overland and ADC Therapeutics, and I look forward to the discussion. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Tony Chen, partner of Joan's Shanghai office. You know, Shanghai is in the middle of a strict COVID lockdown. But even during this period, our clients are actively forming and executing on biotech collaboration cross-border involving China. The fact that the COVID pandemic has made it difficult for us to meet in person has accentuated the value of knowledge sharing platform, such as BioAroundWorld that Echo and other founders are spearheading. I'm very excited to be part of this inaugural event. I look forward to exchanging knowledge and tips with participants. Happy deal making in 2022.
Hi everyone, this is Ginger, the Managing Director at MSQ Ventures. I am thrilled to be the founding member of BioAroundWorld and truly look forward to the value that BioAroundWorld will bring to the community. There are so many parties are contributing to drug development. However, there is a critical piece often being overlooked. That is how to collaborate across different geographies and leverage the talent, funding, patient resources to really develop a drug for global instead of limiting to one territory. Nowadays, with the growing number of ISH members, it provides a very good foundation for global drug development, make it more actionable and feasible. In my career, I have seen more and more biotech companies recognize this opportunity, trying to collaborate with partners in other territory. However, in real world practice, the missing part is the knowledge, right? The experience that could help with the implementation. So what BioAroundWorld trying to do is to create this open communication channel, bring global experts, sharing their experience and provide practical guidance. Again, we sincerely encourage our peers and the colleagues to be part of BioAroundWorld, and together we could achieve greater success. Thank you very much. Look forward to see you more at our future knowledge sharing event.
Thanks, Echo, John, Peter, Alvin, Tony, and Ginger for your wonderful opening speech. In the next 45 minutes, we will have today's first panel discussion about key considerations and strategies accelerating rare disease drug development, hosted by the NeuShen Therapeutics CEO, Joan. Let's welcome.
Okay, well, thank you for providing these platforms for us to just chat about our considerations on the global rare disease drug development. Self-introductions of our panelists today. And also a few words about drug development space and any update on policy guidance that would support this rare disease development. So if everybody agree, and then maybe I'll start myself. For those who are not familiar with me, I'm Shen, the founder and the CEO of NeuShen Therapeutics. So our new company is focusing on exclusively CNS drug development because we will also, in our research side, we will use AAV gene therapy platforms to develop exclusively some blood-brain barrier penetration drugs, which can address some of the unmet needs. So that fits into this rare disease space very well. So to me, for rare disease drug development is still a huge unmet needs. I think that patients' needs really guide us through these future directions. And I therefore very positive about developing drugs for addressing those unmet needs. And then in terms of the current policies and guidance, fortunately, I think with the public supports and then the government supports globally, we've seen quite a few advancement in these policy changes. And then some of you, I'm sure, know that in 2019, FDA had like updated the guidance about rare disease common issues. In these issues, they focusing on the disease, its natural history, and emphasizing these mechanism actions and non-clinical pharmacotoxicology and the human toxicology considerations, and also putting patients' outcome measures into a very important considerations, and also encourage the sponsors to interact with the sponsors, with the agents constantly. I think that's a great help. On the other side of the world, we all noticed that China, for the first time, issued its guidance for rare disease clinical development actually in December of last year, so very timely. And then this new guidance actually adopted the world standard very well, including FDA standard, and also encouraged the research and focusing on the mechanism of actions, and also focusing on the patients, and suggesting to using biomarkers, modelings, and other patient real-world data for the measurements of the clinical benefits or safeties, and also for also encouraging the frequent communications with agencies. And on the other side, in China, actually starting 2018, initiated rare disease listing. So they listed 121 diseases, which is fits into the rare disease arena, I think intentionally to give benefit of the market access. And we can discuss more about it. And recently, China has initiated another drafting listing for rare diseases. So I think all of these are giving the very positive signals that we started to address the needs of these patient populations. Just keep that in mind. We have right now rare diseases. 2/3 of them actually don't have a solution, don't have any adequate treatment. So that's why we are here and wanting to address every patient. No patient should be left out. So I think I'm very inspired to really work with the world scientists to really finding solutions for the patients who do not have right now adequate treatment yet. So I will probably stop here, and then we'll circle around for another round of introductions and your thoughts. Maybe next, Dr. Benjamin Yerxa, would you starting to share with your thoughts?
Yeah, thanks, Joan. I'm Ben Yerxa. I'm the CEO for the Foundation Fighting Blindness, which is a big global research funder for inherited retinal disease, so rare blinding conditions. And I'm also the acting CEO for Opus Genetics, one of the spin-out companies that the foundation has funded through its venture arm called the RD Fund. So you can imagine in our space, we're working with many different genes that cause blindness. In our space, there are about 300 different genes that are known to cause retinal blindness in kids and adults. So for us, we say it's a blessing and a curse. It's a blessing that we actually know what to go after, but it's a curse because we have 300 different genes to try to fix. So it's a very daunting task in our space to go after these diseases that rob people of their vision. From our perspective as a startup company here in the US, we are really dedicated to going after programs for gene therapy where the science is really strong, regardless of the size of the population. Because you see a lot of companies focus on the larger buckets of the rare disease populations because they're chasing the commercial numbers. We're really focused on following the science first The science is ready for a gene therapy. Even if it's a small population, we're willing to take it on and bring it forward for the patients. We feel like that's almost like our duty to our constituents to make that happen. So we're sort of a company that's built by and for the patients, because our largest funder and our founder is really a nonprofit foundation. So it's kind of a unique biotech, and be happy to talk more about our thoughts on the regulatory landscape after the introductions.
Oh, that's very nice. I think it's for devoting to the areas where we don't have immediate returns yet. But I think for a long run, it's really the benefit of the patient will really bring in the satisfactions. Yeah. So yeah, maybe next, Dr. Dewan Zhang, from BeiGene, BeiGene has designated for some of the rare disease development or co-development. Would you share with us your thoughts and about yourself?
Yeah, sure. I can give you a brief background. So I'm Dewan Zeng, head of search evaluation and business development at BeiGene. I've been at BeiGene for 5 years. Before BeiGene, I worked at Pfizer, Gilead, CV Therapeutics, Sharing AG in the reverse order. About 24 years in the industry, dedicated to find cures for patients. And majority of my career, actually, I was in clinical development. I started my career in clinical pharmacology and leading programs from phase 1 to phase 3. And at BeiGene, about 3 years ago, I transitioned to business development, really looking for more collaboration and innovation for BeiGene. And regarding rare disease, actually, most of my rare disease experience was when I was at Gilead. So I was actually leading a program for rare disease. I don't know if many people have heard, it's called LQT3. It's a long QT syndrome, very, very few patients. And so I led a clinical study, a global study in the US and Europe. And I'm happy to share more details how we really work with patient advocacy as well as thought leader, try to identify patients and enroll patients. But I'll leave the details to later. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you for the introductions. Very accomplished in BeiGene. And now we'll turn to Dr. Shen, who is on the other side of the business. You're focusing, your career is more like in investment side. So maybe you can share with us your background and also you as a scientist and investors, your views of rare disease.
Yeah, thank you. This is Shawn. I'm CEO of RareStone Group. So maybe there was some disconnect, but I am not an investor. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm leading a group of people to really try to introduce innovative medicines for rare disease into China and also commercialize these medicines to benefit more rare disease patients. About myself, I started my career many years ago as a consultant with McKinsey, and then later I joined the pharma industry, focusing on how do you commercialize innovative medicines to China, to the emerging markets. And then I started the RareStone Group a few years ago, committed to rare disease exclusively, helping to introduce the innovative medicines, innovative solutions to China, and also building an ecosystem for the rare disease community, so that they don't just receive the medicines they need, but they also receive a supporting mechanism from the society to better manage their disease and live a better life. I can talk more about what we do and what our strategies are later in more detail. Thank you.
That's very nice. So you're mostly based in China, or?
Yes, I'm calling from Shanghai today, same as you, Joan, from the lockdown situation. It's
okay, we're both locked down. okay. Well, yeah, but that did not stop us from doing the global, collaborations. Yeah, that's the nice things about modern, society. Well, thank you for providing all this background and what you're doing. And then, so maybe we can continue the discussion, and I'll let you guys talk more in terms of, what are the, we know we do rare disease. However, what are the major differences, between developing rare disease drug versus the common disease drugs? And then, maybe we can expand our thoughts on the clinical regulatory commercializations. And then, shall we start, whoever felt to talk about these topics?
I can start. Again, my experience many years ago when I was at Gilead, we were interested in some arrhythmic disorders, and this LQT3 patient actually provide the perfect proof of concept, because we were working on a late sodium channel inhibitor. And if you can normalize the QT in those patients, you should reduce sudden death in those patients. But as part of your question was, how different is rare disease versus more common, more prevalent disease? And in this particular case, we have the perfect biomarker QT normalization, but we probably won't have enough patient to do a survival or no control arm, right? So it will be a single arm study to measure QT normalization. So in order to provide adequate safety as well as benefit in terms of outcome, luckily this particular channel also play a role in other cardiovascular disease. So we're looking at one end is ultra rare disease, a PD readout. On the other end is more, arrhythmia disease with a sudden death. And you could definitely run a cardiovascular outcome study to measure the effect of the drug to reduce sudden death. So it's an interesting mixture of rare versus large. If you just consider the time to the market, if the biomarker could be accepted as initial accelerated approval, then the large outcome study can serve as a confirmatory trial. And so that was one consideration. So from, contrast and compare how to leveraging rare versus other opportunity. From clinical trial perspective, rare diseases for LQT3, we're fortunate there's a registry in US, in many countries in Europe. So we know precisely where patients are. And in some of the question is, a lot of this actually are children. So we know how to reach out to the patient advocacy and reach out to their parents. It's a challenging situation from the enrollment perspective, but it's probably more inspiring from just to know how involved the patients are, how desperate they are, and if they feel better, they are able to do more exercise, they're able to do more daily activity. They really provide immediately feedback to the drug developers. So rare disease, I would say, is probably more emotional, more patient involvement. And then if you do provide clinical benefit, you see it right away. And patient just really expressive, really grateful for what we're trying to do. I'll stop here and let other people share their experience.
Well, I think that's very touching. In reality, as clinicians, I can also feel, every individual's with this rare disease have a, larger impact on society, in their families, their advocate groups. So that's really inspired us to, do the right work. But I just wanted to also address the concerns about, the potential commercializations, because, of the not immediate like a return financially. So that really I think we need to do more public awareness in other ways, because unlike the diabetes or cancers, and everybody fully understood, but for rare disease, sometimes they are just left out in a fewer patients. So I think I've seen a lot of changes in this benefit, like some of the policy changes for benefiting these small populations. I think we just need to do more to help the sponsors to invest in these areas, and so the patients can be benefited. I think that's where I feel we need to do more work, and that's where one of the major differences between the rare disease drug development and the common diseases. So that's just my thought. And how about others? What do you think? What do you think? Like that? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I want to echo with Dr. Zeng. Patient enrollment in clinical development for rare disease drugs can be something really challenging from time to time, given the nature of the rare disease and low prevalence and so on. So that's why at RareStone, we have developed this strategy of building an ecosystem to really engage patients early on, even before we start planning out the clinical development, even well in advance of commercialization, to engage patients, cultivate or even incubate some patient organizations before they even start existing. So that when it comes to patient enrollment, or even actually when it comes to trial design, you already have some patients in your friends, in your friends circle, and you can reach out and you can collect inputs. And then of course, when you start patient enrollment, you have a lot of friends already waiting in the queue, raising their hands and say, hey, I want to be part of the trial. And down the road, when it comes to commercialization, you already have a lot of prospective patients waiting for the prescription from their doctors. In our ecosystem approach, we have 4 pillars to help address patient unmet needs. Number 1 is we provide free access to knowledge so that they, based on the symptoms they are suffering from, they can easily search what kind of disease or what kind of indications they may be subject to. That's number 1. We have a rare disease Wikipedia online already published and available for the Chinese patient community, now covering over 140 rare diseases today. Number 2 is we set up this internet hospital dedicated to rare disease, so that patients don't have to travel thousands of miles to BeiGene or Shanghai or the other top-tier cities to get diagnosis or treatment ultimately. Basically, top physicians in the country, top doctors, top KOLs in the country can offer virtual consultation to patients who are willing to pay just say 200 or 300 RMB for 20 minutes, high quality time. So that's the second piece we're building, so that more patients can have access to top physicians. The third piece is provide medical devices, other disease management solutions beyond pharmaceutical solutions to rare disease community. As we all know that rare disease patients, they need to manage their diseases beyond just taking pills. They need medical devices, they need sometimes special nutritional products, they need many other things, digital therapies and so on. So that's something else we're also providing. And this certainly will create a lot of patient adherence around your ecosystem. And this is a one-stop shop where you can find access to knowledge, access to physicians, and access to other solutions to manage your disease. So we're still early in the stage. We're a young company. We are only a few years after our establishment, but we've made some progress, and momentum is strong. And the feedback from the patient community has been very positive, very encouraging.
Yeah, that's very, very nice and very impressive. May I ask you just one more question? So when you are making these registries for these different hospitals and cities, so do you have to get the alignment or permissions from the individual hospitals or the government? So how would you coordinate all these efforts together?
Yeah, so we're actually taking a two-front approach. One front is to coordinate with hospitals and care providers. On this front, we're partnering up with the Chinese Alliance for Rare Disease, Hindle-Yang. And then through them, you have a top-down approach to be much more effective engaging different hospitals and different KOLs. More importantly, we directly engage patients and patient organizations so that, through sponsorships, through other support that we can provide, you immediately build this connection with them. And when it comes to patient enrollment or when it comes to commercialization in the future, that's actually even more effective than trying to reach them through doctors. This is very different from the conventional means like specialty drugs or chronic disease management.
Well, that's very impressive. So yeah, that's mostly in China, right? Maybe Dr. Yerxa, can you share with us your practice or your thoughts when you are conducting these similar trials in the US?
Yeah, I think clearly a big difference between sort of normal pharmaceutical development and rare disease is the size of the trial. So for example, we're talking about tens of patients, not hundreds of patients. So for example, a typical phase 1-2 trial in our space is maybe 9 patients. So it's a smaller number of patients, but they're harder to find. So it still takes a lot of time for enrollment because we have to find people with the exact gene mutation and other entry criteria. So I just want to echo the same thoughts of the other panelists. It's a little bit difficult to find these patients from around the world. Fortunately, there are registries. So Foundation Fighting Blindness has a great registry, so we can find patients, match their genotype and phenotype. But also these patients, they tend to come to the regional centers. So we can also find the patients, at the major medical centers where they have centers of excellence for treating these diseases. But when it's time for a trial and the visits increase in frequency, there's a lot of burden on the patients to travel, right? So I agree that in the future, and even during the pandemic, we've learned that we can actually do parts of trials in a virtual manner. And I think we need to optimize that for the future to find ways to do some things in the home or send people to the patients might actually be more efficient than flying them to a regional center for expensive visits. So we'll figure all that out. But I think that in general, in our space, once you know the gene you need to fix, if it fits within an AAV virus, we can engineer a potential gene therapy, which is really exciting. But the patients and the families go through a big decision because if you enroll in a trial and you get injected with an AAV gene therapy, that's your one chance to get the therapy because you'll now be, it's an exclusion criteria for future trials generally. So it's a big decision to enroll in a gene therapy trial for the patients because it may be your only chance to do it.
Right. Yeah, so I think it's still, so we all agree, challenges, how to design the trials for patient-centric, right? To making sure they can be benefited, and also getting the support from the families and the supports, and also finding the right patients who are willing to come to the trials. So have we thought about how these like challenges in the clinical trials can be, I would say, collaborated to through the different the territories or like continents even, so we can find more patients to complete the data connections and to bringing this compound earlier to the market, instead of for example, nowadays we know most of the clinical trials are, especially in the gene therapy space, are doing separately in US and China. For example, yeah, right. You know, the recently, you know, like approved the Gensma, you know, it was in Novartis, but now, as far as I heard, China only got this IND approval later last year. So now they are initiating the clinical trials. So then you have to find more patients to do that before it can be commercialized. So I just wondered what's, you know, your thoughts as an expert, how we can coordinate better in the global clinical trial settings.
Yeah, maybe I could start on this one. I think that clearly we need to have partners we can work with in China, because coming from the US, we don't know the systems, we don't know the regulations, we don't know the culture. So we need really strong partners in country that can help us do that. Yeah, it's just a kind of a big challenge for us coming from the US to think about that. But one thing I'll just throw out there is that anytime you're doing a more global kind of trial, you need the same instrumentation so that you get very consistent data. So it's one thing the foundation's been really adamant about, is making sure everyone has the same instrument. So if we can collaborate to make sure that we're getting data from the same source, then it can be very consistent no matter where you are in the world. I think that would help.
Yeah. So far, have you seen any like or have you experienced any challenges or some of the tips you've obtained, you know, through these collaborations?
Not yet. You know, I think that typically, you know, in our space right now, it's more US and Europe, you know, collaborating on trials together, because those relationships are strong and they have the similar instrumentation. But I think that the future is to broaden our reach, right? I believe that if you want access to patients, you've got to have access to China. There's no doubt.
That's true. Maybe Dr. Zeng, you can share with us how BeiGene practice that in terms of collaborating globally to, you know, accelerate the patient enrollment.
So I can comment on what we do in oncology. So our internal development is interesting. We don't, some of the rare, let's see, for example, HCC is not rare in China, but maybe less prevalent in other countries. But typically when BeiGene run clinical development, our own internal program, we always run a global study. So it's always, it may be a lot of the first inpatient study was done in Australia, just because the CTA in Australia is very fast. Once we finish dose escalation, and we try to, you know, go to as many countries and regions as possible for, you know, oncology trials. And so setting up those global protocol does take time, but I think it pays off in the end, you know, from enrollment perspective, also in the end, supporting global registration. I think that if anybody wants to learn more about that, we're happy to share that. But essentially just about generating data in all patients that who can access to clinical trials.
Yeah, that's very true. I totally agree with you. You know, the efforts upfront can be paid off, you know, after, you know, you set things up, you know, to coordinate the different regional areas. So maybe I can just also just share with you some of my, you know, experiences, thoughts, not necessarily particularly in rare disease, but the practice to coordinate. You know, when we are when I was in Pfizer doing this bapineuzumab Alzheimer's disease program, and then we wanted to come to Asians, knowing the patients are here, but the instruments we used at the time was very not validated, you know, because of the culture sensitivity, right? And then the patients, very subjective complaints. So, and we did the efforts. I always tell people, like, a small budget doing a large things is, you know, in preparation for, you know, more successful global trials. And then we applied this grant to conduct validation studies in Asia, to include China, Korea, Taiwan, Hong Kong, Singapore, to map out the language differences and culture differences. So to validating these instruments to make sure, the tool represent the true symptoms and true patients. So yeah, and I think, when it comes to validate the instruments, and then that could really help to facilitate the global trials. When, China has to prepare the time at the time, the regulatory submission is, slower. So in using that time for the instrument validation. So by the time you got approval, and then you can apply it more appropriately to increase the global trial success. So I just thought, this is a good example how we should put more efforts upfront to facilitate, the global development. I think the similar efforts should, is applicable to rare disease as well. So I thought it was good to, to share. Xiang, do you have any thoughts on that part as well?
Just 2 quick points. Building on what's been shared, including Asian, in particular, the Chinese population in the clinical trials will allow much faster approval process in China when it comes to China approval down the road. I think this is key, especially for multinational companies. If in the future, ultimately, you consider Japan, China, and other Asian population to be a key target patient population, then you include the Asian in the trials. That's critical. I think that's why Zolgensma has been facing such challenges, and why the Chinese authority doesn't want to give it any green light when it comes to approval in China. Second piece is, I think, how do you communicate and engage the local authorities, the regulatory agency is also critical, not only upfront engagement, but also try to convince them that rare disease is something special, and help them innovate the regulatory policy system. Help them make your own approval process part of the innovation of the system. I think that takes a lot of entrepreneurship, takes a lot of courage, and co-create a solution that's gonna benefit everybody down the road. But you are being the first one. I think that's something certainly will be super rewarding. But it takes a lot of efforts too.
Yeah, so we have to advocate for this and speak loudly, right? The patient's needs are there. Yeah, I agree completely. So yeah, then from the recent regulatory advancement, you can tell the importance have been heard. So we need just to do more work to make it aware, and also I think this come to the next topic is just how we can make it also commercially successful, so we can continue these the positive cycles of encouraging innovations, encouraging the development to benefit the patients. So we even though we talk about the R&D efforts, but how we can coordinate this commercial part, and also to convince the investors to invest in these efforts. So do you have any thoughts on that side? So I'd like to hear more. So maybe go ahead.
Commercialization wise, maybe I can start. Our team is very focused on commercialization, in addition to the clinical development piece of rare disease drugs. When it comes to commercialization, I think 2 components are equally important. One is to, just similar to specialty drugs, you need to build the KOL community who are comfortable and familiar with your drug and able to diagnose and able to treat the patients in the right way. That's something not unique to rare disease, but just do it better and more effectively. The other piece is what I maybe shared earlier already, ecosystem, and engage the patients more directly, especially for rare disease because they're hard to find. So how do you identify, screen, identify, and capture these patients and keep them on your medicine for longer duration of treatment. I think that's key. And nowadays we have the digital tools, we have internet tools, and so on. We can be much more effectively, identify where the patients are, prospective patients. And then, for example, based on the search history of their behavior on internet, usually people are searching for symptoms. They're trying to understand or trying to get a clue what kind of disease they may be potentially, fighting against. So if you combine their search keywords on internet, you have a better chance to identify who are your targeting patients. This is going to help you much more effectively identify where the patients are, and then go grab them, engage them, and then much more effectively share with them the disease knowledge, the treatment guidelines, and the recommendations in the guidelines. I think this is critical. I'll stop here, John.
Yeah. So any other thoughts and from others like Dr. Yerxa?
Yeah, sure. I think so in our space with gene therapy, it's a single treatment, right? So we say one and done. So and it's a treatment that should last theoretically a lifetime. So commercially, it looks really different than traditional pharmaceuticals because it's a single administration. And if it works in these conditions, very debilitating conditions or life-threatening conditions, it's a very high value product, right? I mean, single treatment to last a lifetime to treat, a very tough condition. So the challenge is payers have to pay everything up front in a normal system. And what we've seen with Luxturna, the first gene therapy approved in the US for an inherited condition, they've worked out ways to have a money back guarantee. They have pay as you go, things to make it easier for the payers so they don't freak out when they are faced with $1 million therapy. But $1 million is not a lot of money if it's a single treatment that lasts a lifetime, right? So we have to have these conversations with payers well in advance of approval so they're not shocked. And you have to be willing to work with them because it's different for them. The benefit of rare is that there are not a lot of patients. So even though it's an expensive therapy, it's not a lot of patients. So it's not like it's going to be, it's a drop in the bucket to the whole system is what I'm trying to say. So, I think people just have to get comfortable with high value treatments for these patients and just get comfortable with, being willing to pay for it because the cost of blindness, for example, a lifetime of blindness is much more expensive in the long run. So it's a good value. And in fact, Luxturna is 100% reimbursed in the United States with no problem. So one other thing I'll say about commercialization is that in rare disease with gene therapy, basically the commercialization curves look very different. They ramp up, fairly slowly, and then they peak and then they go down. And there's a very long tail because you basically treat the current population and then you're looking for, incidents of new cases. So for us at Opus, for example, since we're working with several different gene therapies, we need to develop a stack of programs so that as one is peaking, the next one is coming right behind it. So we have a sustainable business of multiple programs.
Oh, yeah, that's very insightful. Yeah, to share with those, commercial strategies. Maybe Dr. Zeng, you can share with us the BeiGene strategies for, commercializations, compound in China or Greater China. Yeah.
Yeah, I know we have established a collaboration with a company USA on a couple of rare disease treatment. Unfortunately, I'm not from the commercial team, so I really couldn't comment on our commercial strategy there. But I know that I was part of the deal due diligence. I know BeiGene, we're very passionate. We really want to provide drug to patients who are in high unmet need. That's the reason that we decided to do that collaboration. And again, Ben, if you're looking for a China partner, we can discuss. However, not every single treatment you need to look for NPV positive, right? Your impact on the society sometimes is not measured by the drug price. And so I don't know how the commercial performance of those drugs, but we truly believe we make a difference in patients' life.
Yeah. Yeah, so actually, I just want to add on that, for China, it's just a slower infiltration, right? For being accepted, and also to see the outcome of the patients as a result to impact the policy makings and also the commercial strategies. So as these, and as far as I know, as I mentioned, we already had this guidance for rare disease development, and listing of the rare diseases is a good sign, for those which are listed there will be benefited from the NRDL or other government coverages. So I think as far as I know, we've had multiple discussions from different parties, including the policymakers, to talk about in encouraging the innovations for the rare diseases by covering the basics and allowing the spaces for commercial like insurance and self-pay pocket, for covering the cost. And also there's one difference is I'm sure you agree with me, especially Shawn, that even it's rare diseases, but for China, because of the base is large, and so overall the patient numbers are relatively larger. So if you calculate an NPV well, gradually in the end, we can still, have these positive outcomes, with different parties' engagement. So that overall, I think that's where, we are thinking the trending towards commercializations. So Shawn, you want to add more?
No, I certainly agree with you, John. If you strike the fine balance, the right balance between how many people, how many patients you can find, and then how much you want to charge as the drug price, you certainly can get a reasonable NPV as return. So I agree.
Okay, great. So I think we don't have much time. Maybe we can just dive into our last closing remarks. Maybe each of us to give us like a few sentences about how we think the rare disease should be developed and how the collaboration spirit should be like encouraged to accelerate these areas of development. I would love Dr. Yerxa, do you want to start?
Sure. I think the dream here for me is to have global trials for rare disease where 1 or 2 well-controlled trials with patients in multiple countries can serve as registration trials in all these different countries. That's the beauty of collaboration. And so that's a world I'd like to see in the future.
Great. Dr. Zeng?
And I think we start to see that, I think from a different country, the regulatory approval requirement for rare disease may be more flexible, right? And I like to see more, I guess, harmonization in different countries, accepting data from other countries so that, patients in their country have access to innovative medicine in a rare disease.
It's wonderful. Dr. Shen?
Yeah, 2 key messages to leave here. One is to really utilize digital tools, internet tools to engage rare disease patients, unlike in any other disease area, so that you can really empower the patients to accelerate clinical development and commercialization in the future. Second piece is really encourage the regulatory bodies to be more innovative, to be more willing to give rare disease some special consideration when it comes to approval. After all, it's not going to impact the large population when you consider the risks versus benefits. but these are a group of people who are desperately in need of innovative medicine. Thank you.
Well, thank you. I just want to add more, saying, well, we still have 2/3 of the rare disease not being covered with adequate treatment. So I just felt, no patient should be left out. We are hoping in the future we have more collaborations globally for simultaneous development, targeting the disease areas with unmet needs and hoping find solutions for everyone. And also this requires this whole society support, not just for R&D perspective, but also from the investment and the commercialization and the policies, regulatory the policies. So working together, and I'm hoping that they come out earlier. So I think we are using all of our time, and then thank you everyone for having this very nice conversation and discussions. So, well, thank you everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Hope our conversation continue. Yeah. So going into next phase of collaborations, right? Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
Thanks, Joan, Shawn, Dewan, and Ben for the fantastic roundtable discussion. And thank you again for joining us today. In the next 45 minutes, we will have today's second panel discussion about global capital market forecast, hosted by Goodwin partner Wendy. Let's welcome.
Good afternoon, good evening, no matter where you are. This is Wendy Pan. I'm a partner with Goodwin Procter. I'm in charge of the life sciences practice of Goodwin in Asia. And today we have our very distinctive panel members, and we have Hindle-Yang, CEO of MSQ. We have Philip Gallon, Managing Director of Mollis & Company, and my colleagues, Shoaib and Gaius, partner of our San Francisco office, and Bosco Yu, partner of our Hong Kong office. Maybe starting from Echo, maybe you can give a brief introduction about yourself.
Thanks, Wendy. Hi, everyone. And my name is Hindle-Yang. I'm the CEO of Arise Acquisition Corp and MSQ Ventures. And so in my past few years, I'm very focused on the bridge, the US, Europe, and China, especially in the life science. So I'm very happy today to join this distinguished panelist to discuss what's happening in the capital market now, and what's the transaction and what's the trend. Thanks.
Philip?
Hi, everybody. Thank you. My name is Philippe Gallon. I'm a partner at Mollis & Company. I'm based in London and focus on life sciences, M&A.
Shell and Bosco?
Hi, my name is Shoaib Gaius. I am a partner at Goodwin Procter in the San Francisco office. I represent life science companies throughout their life cycle, including sort of taking them through IPOs and managing them on capital markets. We had a very active year last year, and we are closely evaluating this year for all sorts of transactions, and look forward to discussing those with you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Bosco Yu, a partner at the Hong Kong office of Goodwin Procter. I specialize in capital markets and pre-IPO investments, and also with a sector focus in life sciences company. So my experience also include listings for biotech companies, as well as SPAC and de-SPAC transactions in the Hong Kong listing market.
Yeah. So I think everybody is interested to know what the capital market looks like for biotech companies and globally, especially in the US, Europe, and Asia. So Shoaib, you have done so many US NASDAQ biotech IPOs. What's your view about the market?
The market right now is fairly soft. So, last year's I did more IPOs than this quarter the whole market has done and on NASDAQ. So, you know, if you sort of compare this year to last year, right, the Q1 of last year was about $40 billion of deals. This year, Q1 has been only $2 billion. I think we've seen about 7 companies go out, of which 2 have been biotech companies. We see a few more companies in the pipeline. But overall, the market has been very soft. And part of this is because a lot of the class of 2021 IPOs are not performing well. About 3/4 of them are trading below their IPO price. And therefore the valuations are down. Companies are kind of digesting what the right valuations would be and when the right window is going to open up for them. So, you know, across the board, it's right now a very soft market in the US.
So Philip, is that the same you observed among European companies?
Yeah, absolutely. I think look, the record year last year and 2020 wasn't bad either. I think everything that Shoaib just described is true, and it's true also in Europe. I think you know, a lot of biotech companies in Europe really look at NASDAQ listing, or fewer and fewer local listings. We still see a few of them, but I think a lot of them are looking at getting listed in the US, and that's been extremely soft. I think conversely, I think we've seen relatively robust private market in terms of financing. I think, you know, not as an alternative to IPO necessarily, but there's still quite a bit of money available for strong stories in the private markets, true in Europe, true in the US. And, you know, I think we are seeing a slight pickup in M&A as well, as the alternative of capital markets becomes less available. The biotech companies, they turn themselves to, you know, asset dilution, if you will, instead of equity dilution. And we see more activity on the M&A front as a result of that. And obviously, valuations have compressed. So the benchmarks tend to be more affordable for acquirers when compared to the peaks that we saw last year, which were extremely high.
So Bosco, you know, how about Asia market, Hong Kong, biotech, you know, Chapter 18A?
I think Hong Kong generally follows the global trend recently. So it's a bit soft in the last 3 months in terms of successful listings of biotech company. But the infrastructure for biotech company listing in Hong Kong is still very solid. So we have seen 29 applications in the pipeline. Obviously, they are waiting for an optimal time to market and to list. And then recently, there's a vaccine company, Jiangsu RecBio, that just got listed in March 30th. So for very solid companies, we still see the market reacting quite positively, although not as robust or, you know, as voluminous as before. So I think, you know, once the economic cycle returns to the positive trend, we would see that, you know, the listings of biotech companies would continue in Hong Kong, being the second largest biotech companies hub in the world and the largest one in Asia. And obviously, the Hong Kong Stock Exchange has also recently initiated the SPAC listing regime, which also accommodate for de-SPAC of biotech companies. And we have been receiving requests from some biotech companies to achieve a listing via a SPAC in Hong Kong. So obviously there are different options for biotech companies to be listed, with the short to mid-term market being a bit soft, but I think the fundamentals are still here that once the economic cycle is on the upward trend, we think the rebound should be promising.
Yeah. So talking about SPACs, you know, and the US market actually has experienced almost a 2-year of SPAC frenzy. And Shoaib, Echo, I think you all have either done SPAC deals or witnessed that. Just wonder, like your view on SPAC transactions. By the way, myself also have done SPAC deals, and even before the SPAC deals become trendy. I have my view. I will share that with you guys later. But Shoaib and Echo, yeah, just wonder if you could share your view.
Yeah, the SPAC deals had become very trendy in 2020, 2021. I think that excitement has been somewhat fading away because of a lot of regulatory pushback, a lot of accounting issues, a lot of regulatory proposals, the benefits that typically SPACs had in terms of providing projections, liability considerations are either are going away or expected to go away, so people are adjusting expectations. And overall, the entire IPO market valuation drag has kind of dragged down the expectations about redemptions as well. So redemptions in a lot of the SPACs are going up. You're seeing going from sort of 60 to 70 to 80%. The general sort of market trends are impacting SPACs as well. But on the other hand, there are quite a few SPACs out there that are ready to do deals. So there might be an opportunity as well if somebody wants to go public via this route. Considerations involved there include doing a strong PIPE transaction together with a SPAC that will enable to fund the company even if there are redemptions. And we are also seeing some creative ways when pipes are not available or when redemptions are high, investors are looking into equity lines of credit and alternative means of funding the public company, and so using the SPAC as a vehicle to go public, almost like a reverse merger, and then doing financings or looking to do financings on the capital markets in more creative ways.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, actually. Obviously, it's been a frenzy of activity, not just in healthcare, by the way, or in biotech, just across the board with SPACs. And I don't think it's going away completely, but it's going to be significantly reduced in terms of activity. It still remains an interesting tool for some companies to go public, but it's not for everybody. And I think you'll see an increasing amount of segregation between what can go public through a SPAC and what cannot. And I think we also see, you mentioned reverse mergers, Troy, but I think we're also going to see that happening sort of almost as a competition to SPACs, because there's a lot of companies trading at or below cash right now. And those essentially are candidates for reverse mergers for companies who want to go public. So I think we're going to see that evolving over the next few months and this year. But I don't think SPACs are completely going away. It's just going to be much harder. The regulator is really, there's a lot of scrutiny, and things are going to change. And there will be a lot of SPACs that, will disappear without doing a deal over the next 12 months.
So, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I just totally agree with Shoaib and Philip's points. Actually, what the Shoaib just shared, what's the changes in the SPAC, I just personally experienced from the beginning to all the changes happening last year. We were the ones, I think probably the first ones to really facing it and the challenging and how to take the correct action. So also for the SPAC this year, you can see the totally different from the last year or in the past 2 years. It's been same, is aligned with what's going on and the IPO market now, and is become more difficult to raise the fund for the IPO, and then it's difficult to find the high quality assets and even the good assets, how to match with a good fit SPAC is also become more difficult. And so I think, however, I agree with Philip. I think this will not going away. I think it has been established I think the SEC's more actually set up more rules for it is a good sign, even for us, for the sponsors, for the spec, because we see it's more like a, not to say mainstream, but it's more like an alternative for the IPO. And so you just like us, we sponsored this Ares acquisition cup, and we established a company in July, and we successfully raised $69 million in November. So it's even the SEC had changed so many rules or more, have more restrict regulations. However, if you find a good team, like the law firm is very important, and also the audit firm, and even your own sponsor team who can truly understand the process and the requirement from SEC, I think is still doable. And even I think it make probably more the high quality spec, because that was their concern, is because the sponsors who don't really know the capital market just sponsor the spec, and it's become just like abused. I think this kind of like a vehicle. However, I think such the restriction will make clean the name of the spec. I even see that trend.
Yeah. I have a question. I want to go back to Philip, but I want to ask Bosco the question first. You know, and the Hong Kong spec rules are different from the US spec rules, and maybe you can highlight the differences, and also I think, you know, like a US spec rules actually is moving towards the Hong Kong more strict direction.
Yeah, so the Hong Kong regime, it's much more strict than the US spec regime. So because listing of shell companies has not been something that the Hong Kong Stock Exchange been very keen before the spec regime. So the Hong Kong spec regime is actually a midway between listing of a shell company for acquisition purposes and with the aim that company with substance will be injected. So the key differences is that for the SPAC listing offering itself, it's restricted to professional investors only who could subscribe for the SPAC shares. So I don't think that feature is in the US SPAC regime. So by professional investors, they are talking about private equity funds with $1 billion in assets under management, or other institutional or financial companies, or even individuals with at least $1 million in assets. So that's the ticket size that they're talking about. It also has a very strict minimum ticket size. So each port lot, meaning the minimum size, would be 1 million Hong Kong dollars. So that's roughly 160 grand US per broad lot ticket. So they're using that as a barrier to enter the market. So to lower the risk for unsophisticated investors to go into the SPAC. And obviously all of these restrictions will be lifted once the de-SPAC happens. The other strict rules is that the promoter or the or who are the sponsors in the US SPAC, they need to be licensed by the Securities and Futures Commissions in Hong Kong. So one of the financial regulators in Hong Kong. So in terms of who could actually initiate a SPAC, it's also subject to very high standard in terms of the investment management experience. So that's another barrier that does not really happen in the US SPAC regime. But lastly, a lot of people are querying about, the feasibility of the Hong Kong SPAC is that the de-SPAC target itself must meet the Hong Kong listing requirement itself, despite only a de-SPAC section. So a lot of the participants would query, then why don't they just do a listing themselves rather than being de-spec by a spec? I think the key difference here is that for our spec structure, you have the certainty that the funds have already been raised in the spec offering, and the D-spec, which is, if the D-spec target is eligible for listing in Hong Kong, it's just a matter of the merger and acquisition. Whereas if it's a straight pre-revenue biotech listing in Hong Kong, despite that the company would be eligible for listing, because of market sentiments like where we are right now, there are a lot of companies that would have filed a listing application but still unable to list because of market sentiments, which would not have that risk if it's a de-spec transaction. So that's
I think we probably have given enough time on the spec. So Philip, I just want to ask you a quick question. Between de-spec IPO and a merger with a distressed company, a biotech company which has a failed clinical program. So what's your recommendation for the target company? Which would be the preferred choice?
I don't know if there's a preferred choice, but look, I think both are interesting alternatives. I think the question was reverse merging into a distressed, if you will, shell company at the end of the day is, I think it's hard to do that with a total absence of strategic rationale. I think there needs to be, because typically those companies have a management team, they have, still assets, and even if they are distressed, there are people and there are, typical programs, and it's not, just a cash box like a SPAC. So when you think about a reverse merger, as a private company and willing to reverse merge to a public biotech company, I think there needs to be some strategic merit, and of course that probably narrows down the potential candidates depending on who you are. So I think the exercise of screening what candidate you can reverse merge into is important, and it remains a merger at the end of the day, right? And typically there are social issues, governance issues, management team, who is going to be running the company, etc. So I think it has the complexity of a merger or an acquisition, if you will, that does not necessarily exist with a SPAC, where typically you are more in control. Again, depends on the SPAC, I suppose. So I think that's really one of the key differences. On the other end, I think you don't have some of the uncertainties, I guess, or the regulatory uncertainty that revolves around SPACs today. But I would think that the universe of potential merger candidates to do that with is much more narrow.
Yeah. I read on the Endpoint News that it seems there were some signs that the capital market is recovering. Have you seen that sign?
Yeah, I mean, there's been a big raise in Europe, for example. I think it was a couple of weeks ago. Argenx raised, I think, almost more than $700 million. It's a European company, but listed on the Nasdaq. That's a big deal, particularly in the context of a very soft, to quote Sherry, market where there's just very little activity. So I think investors are discerning. I think investors are there to support their stories, but it's very often driven by a catalyst. I think it's hard to go out and raise capital without a catalyst, clinical, whatever. But I don't think it's completely closed, but it's very, very much on a case-by-case basis. I think, it works for established companies with a good track record. It's hard to do it in a vacuum.
Mm-hmm. And so, if, the market is not fully recovering, so what should a company do, during the period? Apart from, looking for strategic partnership transactions, finding other sources, financing, and do an M&A deal. What are the strategies?
Yeah, I'm happy to first go at this. But look, first of all, I think it really depends on what stage your company's at, right? And whether you're looking at diluting your equity or diluting your assets. I think those are different options, broad alternatives that you may have, and some of that very much depends on when or in where in the life cycle of the company you sit. I think there are alternatives. I mean, there is private capital available. We see a lot of Series Bs right now, Series Cs, extension of those series as well. So there is money that is willing to be put to work. Some more traditional capital raise in the private markets. But in addition to that, I think we've seen alternative options also emerge over the last few years and become much more available today in terms of royalty financing. That goes back to sort of diluting your assets a little bit, but it can be very creative, very bespoke, and sometimes extremely interesting and very often cheaper than sometimes straight equity and private rounds. And of course, some companies may find interesting to monetize some of their assets, license, sale, regional deals. I think there's a whole host of things that you can do. I think it very much depends on what the end game is. If a company is doing this as a bridge to go public, I think it's really important they keep in mind, preserving their equity story is really important. Because if you do something that then limits your option down the road in terms of exit or going public, then it becomes more challenging. So it's something to keep in mind, and a lot of those can be are not mutually exclusive to that.
And I totally agree with you. And in fact, I think no matter what you do for a biotech company, and doing a big licensing partnership deal, get the endorsement from big pharma partner is always important. And even like if you don't have a clinical stage asset, even do a preclinical stage collaborations could enhance your value and beef up your pipeline later. In addition to licensing and strategic partnership transactions, you mentioned, be creative. I think actually there are a lot of creativities people can explore in life sciences space, especially in cross-border settings. Echo, like a MSQ. I think advised Hillhouse, Overland, and did the JV with ADC, and we advised Allergen and did the JV with Hillhouse, Overland as well. So the JVs actually is a very creative type of transaction, especially when what you are exploring is your asset in a region, in a territory where you don't have the resource, where you don't have the bandwidth to grow, to develop. And by doing a JV with a financial sponsors such as Hillhouse, and other VC and institutional investors, you have a very strong financial partner, and also who knows China very well, and who can help you to develop your asset. At the same time, you can have receive upfront milestones, royalties from the JV, as well as some equity in the JV. It's really a very good, a very attractive way for US, Europe biotech companies to explore its rights in Asia, in the regions where it cannot, it does not have the resource or bandwidth.
Yeah, I totally agree. Actually, this year we observed more the creative or think outside of the box transactions or the collaboration, especially for the cross-border, and compared to the last year or last few years is more like a licensing or license out traditional transaction. But this year, also we can see another trend is the innovation from China. Actually, a lot of the Western biotech company, because of this capital market is so soft, they are more developing their in-house their innovation, so they want to collaborate with their either China, Europe together to bring the other regions innovation to US. And another trend we see, just like back to the capital market, actually I think at this time is kind of like a good news for the investors too, because we see more and the high quality assets or the high quality team as founders actually looking for their fundraising, but because of the limited fund. So for the investors, really like a long-term, the investors is, I think on the bright side, it can be a good opportunity as well.
Yeah. In fact, you just remind me a very interesting successful story. Probably you have read in the news, a Chinese company, Harbor Biomed, just out-licensed its bispecific antibodies to AstraZeneca. And I know Harbor Biomed very well because I literally created the company. The Harbor Biomed actually is a result of a acquisition financing transaction, which was executed almost simultaneously. So a group of Chinese founder management team and teamed up with an investor. They acquired with cash and equity Netherlands biotech company, Harbor, in Harbor, and it created, Harbor Biomed, which went IPO a year ago on Hong Kong Stock Exchange. So it's a, like a very interesting, successful story of marrying, technology from Europe, resource, financial resource, and clinical resource from China. And now it teamed up with AstraZeneca again. And so we see, the more and more global collaboration. I expect to see more and more global collaborations of that nature. So, share, Shoet, for a company, who has the aspiration to get listed on NASDAQ, what do they need to do?
You'll mute, Shoaib.
Yeah, at this moment, we have a lot of strong candidates and companies that are sort of sitting out, but to be a strong company to be listed these days, you want to have a differentiated story. You need to have differentiated data. You also need to have a strong sort of set of insiders, crossover type investors, and if you can go in the market with the IPO covered, you will be in a strong position to sort of say that the insiders have full coverage, and then you'll be able to go and raise a bit more and diversify that pool in the market. Strong management is very important. The investors are looking for managers who have performed well, who have experience in taking companies public. And it's also important for the company's profile to be such that it's a M&A candidate. investors are looking for some sort of inflection points, and if they see that the company, can down the road be a pharma target company, they are more interested in being the investors in the IPO. So there's a lot of factors that go into making a company strong, and some companies are getting in the sort of working with the banks right now, and they're in the process. I mean, what they're looking at is that even though the market is soft, the window will open, and when it opens, it might be a very short window because everybody would want to go out at that time. So they are getting ready. They are sort of even starting the process with the SEC and on a confidential basis, so that when the window opens, they have a very short turnaround, and being out there flipping public and marketing the deal and closing the deal within a month, as opposed to the 3 to 4 months that it takes if you start the process when the market opens.
I think I agree with all that, but in addition, I think you have to have a strong IR outfit, because you can't just get out on the market and educate people at the same time. In an IPO, this is an exercise that takes place well ahead of an IPO. So having people on the ground, particularly if you're looking at IPO in the US, having people that are responsible for IR in the US and have educated potential prospective investors ahead of time, well ahead of time, is important. And so there's a whole IR exercise to be done, I would say at least a year ahead of potential IPO, to educate potential investors so they don't discover the story. And in a crowded market, like Shoaib just described, people will be very selective, and they will go to the stories they understand better, instead of spending weeks trying to understand it. So I think that's something that is often overlooked and takes time to build.
Yeah. Also, validated data is very important, because last year, that's over 100 companies be listed IPO from biotech industry. However, a lot of them are rushed to the market, is a preclinical stage. Actually, this is kind of like new to the IPO companies. Normally, the IPO companies with the phase 1, phase 2, right? Already in the phase 2. But last year, we see a lot of the preclinical companies. So I think for now, actually, the data, that's why you build, and also to do the global clinical trial to collect more the data in a short time is very important for the biotech company to be successful IPO.
Yeah. I just want to add one point from legal perspective. For non-US companies or companies incorporated outside China, outside US, such as Chinese companies, you also need to be prepared on the accounting and financial statements front. Last year, a number of our clients were actually having a difficult time to get the accounting firm lined up, and also especially for companies with operations in China, like the kind of accounting firm you are going to engage is also very critical. And Philip, you probably know, sometimes for European companies and to get listed on NASDAQ, or Asian companies to get listed on NASDAQ, sometimes also they need to do some restructuring, like redomicile, the company, into China, into the US, or set up the US operations. Which often takes some time. So as Shoaib said, like you want to be prepared and ready to go. So you may want to start the restructuring process a little bit earlier.
Yeah, totally agree. Yeah.
Yeah. So on the investor side, during this period of time, like what should you look at? like private
You mean
companies?
as an investor?
Yeah.
What type of investor? Public, private? It depends.
Yeah, that's a good.
I mean, look,
yeah.
I think generally speaking, independently of whether this is a private or listed company, I think it goes back to what Shoaib was saying. I think you need validation, you need science, good science, obviously, and conviction on that, but data is really important. I think, as Echo was mentioning, I think the flurry of preclinical stories that have gone to the market have really, cooled investors quite a bit, and I think they're really looking for data, tangible data, to anchor their conviction on, and so that's. And it's much harder to get out on a story right now. You have to demonstrate that you have something that works.
Yeah, we have also seen some money that has gone into alternative financing, debt, or royalty financing. That's I mean, for companies with clinical stage or approved products, that could be a good way to raise money to. As you said, it's non-dilutive to your equity. So, we are approaching to the end of this discussion. Just wonder, if you have some advice that you would like to give to the companies in the audience. Maybe each person just, at one point,
Yeah, I always start. I think it's winter, not only because of the capital market, but it's the whole world. However, I think medicine is still the cure for all the patients. I think we should stay on the hope and they're still working on to strive to cure more the patients and globally. And I think this is a time we have to work together.
And prepare, cultivate your relationships, and be ready, because when the time comes, it's going to go quick.
Including relationships with investment bankers and
lawyers,
legal advisors, accountants. Yeah.
Okay. M&A advisors. Yeah. I mean, people probably have to readjust expectations as well, right? Both on the private financing round and on the cap markets. We may not see the kinds of valuations that we saw over the last year or two, even if the market opens up. So readjust expectations, focus on the fundamentals. You have to fund the companies to advance your programs. And you may have to take a down round IPO, but if you want to access the capital markets, you should, there is a lot of liquidity that'll open up, and you should be just ready to go when the time comes.
Bosco? Oh, you are on mute.
Oh, sorry. So Hong Kong remains a very strong market when the market rebounds. But again, investors would look at very solid data and product pipelines, as the other panel members has mentioned. So always do focus on that, and I think that's always a viable option for financing.
Yeah. My advice is look at, be open-minded and be creative. There are still lots of opportunities out there, especially on the cross-border front. Well, we are on time. Thank you all. And have a good day and have a good evening.
Thank you, Wendy. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
It's a pleasure.
It's a pleasure. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Wendy, Echo, Shawn, Bing, Bosco, and Philip for the fantastic roundtable discussion. This roundtable discussion concluded today's part 1 of the event. Thank you very much for joining today. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact us through WeChat or visit our website at msq.ventures.com. Tomorrow, the part 2 of the event will be started at 9 a.m. to 11 a.m. ET. Looking forward to you joining. Seeing you tomorrow.